Well, I think it's a great day to celebrate our mothers. Amen? I'd be willing to bet no one would argue with me if I said if it weren't for our mothers, we wouldn't be here. Yeah. So, that being said, I wanted to focus on mothers today. And when I saw Brother Earl's sermon title, I was afraid he was going to steal my verses, but went in a different direction, so we're okay, we're good. Lord works things out right the way He wants it. If it had been the same verses, I would have just figured God really wanted you to hear them, so it would have been okay anyways. But I'm going to start out by reading Proverbs, verse 31. The first thing I want to read is verse 10. You got your Bibles, turn to Proverbs chapter 31, because most of the lesson is going to come from there today. Proverbs 31:10 says, "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies." Now we know in our lives, we've been blessed to have women in our lives. We've been blessed to have our wives. We've been blessed to have our mothers. Because someone has once found themselves a virtuous woman which is worth far above the price of rubies. When we think about our mothers and we think about what all they've done for us, we think about how mothers are our teachers, mothers are disciplinarians, mothers are maids, some mothers are even gardeners and mowers of lawns, and almost always mothers understand that sometimes it's just more important to bake cookies than it is to wash a window. Our mothers become our nurses, our doctors, our psychologists, our counselors, our chauffeurs, our coaches. They are developers of personalities, molders of vocabularies, shapers of attitudes, and the mother's soft voice saying the words, "I love you," to a child is that child's first impression of the love of God. So mothers are all these things, and they're much, much more. Now this next little thing I want to read to you, I'm going to read a little something that Irma Bombeck wrote this, so it's not exactly scriptural, but we'll take a little license with it because I like what it says. Irma Bombeck tells of God in the act of creating mothers. She says on the day that God created mothers, He had already worked long overtime, and the angel said to Him, "Lord, you sure are spending a lot of time on this one." The Lord turned and said, "Have you read the specs on this model? She is supposed to be completely washable, but not plastic. She's to have 180 moving parts, all of them replaceable. She is to have a kiss that will heal everything from a broken leg to a broken heart. She is to have a laugh that will disappear when she stands up. She is to be able to function on black coffee and leftovers. And she is supposed to have 6 pairs of hands." 6 pairs of hands, said the angel. "That's impossible." "It's not the 6 pairs of hands that bother me," said the Lord. "It's the 3 pairs of eyes. She's supposed to have 1 pair that sees through doors. So whenever she says, 'What are you kids doing in there?' she already knows the answer to the question. She has another pair in the back of her head to see all the things she's not supposed to see but must see. And then she has 1 pair right in front that can look at a child that just goofed and communicate love and understanding without even saying a word." "Well, that's too much," said the angel. "You can't put that much in 1 model. Why don't you rest for a while and resume your creating tomorrow morning?" "No, I can't," said the Lord. "I'm close to creating someone very much like myself. I've already come up with a model who can heal herself when she is sick, who can feed a family of 6 with 1 pound of hamburger, and who can persuade a 9-year-old to take a shower." Then the angel looked at the model of the motherhood a little more closely and said, "She's too soft." "Oh, but she is tough," said the Lord. "You'd be surprised at how much this mother can do. Can she think? Asked the angel. Not only can she think, said the Lord, but she can reason and compromise and persuade. Then the angel reached over and touched her cheek. This one has a leak, he said. I told you that you couldn't put that much in one model. That's not a leak, said the Lord. That's a tear. What's a tear for? Asked the angel. Well, it's for joy, for sadness, for sorrow, for disappointment, for pride. You're a genius, said the angel. And the Lord said, oh, but I didn't put the tear there. Our mothers have always been something special to us. They always will be, whether they're still with us or whether they're not, whether they've gone on. When God created mothers, He created something special. It's a special bond that can never be replaced. It can never be duplicated in any other way. Now, our mothers are a lot of things to us, and one day a school teacher was teaching her class a lesson about magnetism. Showed it how you can run the magnet over a lot of metal objects, and then they'll pick up those metal objects and hold on to them. And the next day, she gave a little pop quiz. She said, my name has 6 letters. The first one is M. I pick things up. What am I? Surprisingly enough, 50% of the class answered with mother. Mothers pick things up. Yes, they do. Mothers pick up a lot of things. I don't know anybody here. I know I was just as bad at it as probably anybody, leaving stuff laying around and had my mother come up behind me and clean things up behind me. And I know I've seen my wife do that many a time for my boys, because they think that it's amazing how a kid can walk into a room and look at it and say it's clean. And a mother can walk in and start pointing out exactly where they missed things here and yonder. But we all know that our mothers do a wonderful job of cleaning things up after us. And not only our mothers, but those of us that are married, our wives become almost like a second mother to us. They clean up after us as well, because we don't always keep things clean after ourselves. But a mother is more than just a magnet, more than just someone to have around the home to pick things up. There are many, many more things to us. And we're going to look in Proverbs 31, and I'm going to look at 3 different things, 3 different aspects of mothers that are defined in Proverbs 31. First of all, she has hands to work. Her hands work. Our mothers are always busy doing work for us. There's a story once about a young boy who reached the age that he could go to work, and he went to work for his dad and was working with his father, and he was boasting one day about all the hard work he goes to do when he goes to work with his dad. He says, yeah, we get up at 5 a.m. and we get out there and we work really hard all day. And the guy he was talking to asked him, says, well, does anybody else get up with you? He says, yeah, my mama gets up and she cooks breakfast for me and Daddy. And he says, well, what about your dinner? He says, oh yeah, when we get home from work, Mother's there, she's got dinner ready, and she's fixed that for us too. And she says, well, does your mother have the afternoons all to herself then? And he says, oh no. When Mama's home in the afternoon, she's cleaning the house, she's looking after some of the other children, she's getting her supper ready and lunch and cleaning the clothes and washing the bedding and all these things that she has to do. And then finally at the end of the day, we all get to watch a little TV and go to bed. She says, well, what about your mother? What does she do? She says, well, Mama still doesn't get to go to bed. She's still got to iron out and lay the clothes out for tomorrow morning and get everything ready. And the guy asks him, says, well, do you get paid for what you do with your dad? He says, well, of course I do. Daddy and I both get paychecks. He says, well, what about your mother? Does she get paid? He's like, Mama get paid? No, Mama doesn't work. Our mamas do a lot of work. If there's anyone here who doesn't believe that mamas don't work just because they're not employed outside of the home, I think they're sorely mistaken. I think we have put too much, the pendulum has swung way too far. As Brother Arnold said back during the World War when women went to the workplace, and now too many times I've seen women look down upon those that choose to stay home and raise their children. And I think that's wrong. Our text says in here that They have hands that work. We see mothers in all kinds of work in this text. We see in verse 13, we see a woman that sews. Verse 13 says, she seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. Verse 19, she layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. 22, she maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. Not only does she sew, but some of you ladies would like this one, she shops. Hey, a good working woman, mother, shops. Says so in verse 14. She is like the merchant ships. She bringeth her food from afar. She goes out and seeks things out. Another thing I wanted to point out, I noticed this as Brother Earl had brought the lesson about Hannah, about a woman who sews. And you go back and you look at 1 Samuel 2:19, and it says there, this is after she's already given over her son. It says, moreover, his mother made him a little coat and brought it to him from year to year when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. So just because she's given over her son to the Lord didn't mean she still didn't care for him and love him just as much as anybody else. I kind of thought that was interesting, tied into this, the woman that sews. She also cooks. Verse 15, it says, she riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. We see here she's also a planter of vineyards in verse 16. She considereth a field and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hand she planteth a vineyard. We see women gardening, cooking, shopping, sewing, doing all these things, and all the work of a mother. And we see it wrapped up, wrapped here in verses 15 and 18. Starts out, she riseth also while it is yet night. Early in the morning she riseth to start her day. In verse 18 it says, her candle goeth not out by night. When there's work to be done, a mother's work is never done. There's that old saying that says, a man works from sun to sun, but a woman's work is never done. I know I've seen many a time in both growing up as a child and in my own home where my wife and my mother would have to stay up late because she knew that the boys or myself would have needed something the next day for school or for work or whatever it is, and they just faithfully do the service and just continue to lift us up and do what it is that we need in our lives. In verse 27 it says that she looketh well to the ways of her household and eateth not the bread of idleness. Our mothers are not lazy people. They don't eat the bread of idleness. They're always busy doing things for us, to lift us up, to edify us, to support us. And so we should all bless our mothers, bless our wives for all the hard work that they've done for us over the years and continue to do for us. For she has her hands to work. But not only do her hands work, but her mouth speaks. Verse 26 tells us, she openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. You know, John Wesley, pretty famous preacher back in the day, he was a student at Oxford University, and he was shocked when he got there to find out how much drinking was going on among the students. Imagine what he would think going to our universities today, seeing all the drinking going on. But he wrote home to his mother and asked her for some counsel about this. And the words that she sent back was, my dear son, remember that anything which increaseth the authority of the body over the mind is an evil thing. So great instructions coming from a mother. We know that we always hear these wonderful words of wisdom passed down to us from our mothers. Another preacher who had 4 sons, and all his 4 sons became ministers of the gospel too. And at a family reunion one time, one of the friends asked one of the sons, he says, well, which of the Morgans is the greatest preacher? He looks to his daddy and he says, Mother. Mother is a great preacher in the home. You know, mother doesn't get behind the pulpit. Mother doesn't bring the lesson to the church. But mother brings many a lesson to the children in her own home. And many a word of wisdom that we've taken away from our mothers. You know, we always hear this phrase, Mama always says. You know, several years back when I was in high school, the movie Forrest Gump was a big thing, and it's Mama always says, Mama says this, Mama says that. And it's something that we all grow up in. And we're out in the workplace, and we're always saying, Mama says this. And there's so many words of wisdom that have been passed down from our mothers. One of my favorites, of course, growing up, it wasn't my mother, but it was Sesame Street. Sesame Street's a good thing. I like Sesame Street. It's one of my favorite shows growing up. And Grover used to go, and he'd have a little episode called Super Grover. He'd be flying around, and he'd look down, and he'd see some boys fighting. And he'd go down to the boys, and he'd say, boys, you shouldn't fight. He says, my mama always said. You know what my mama always said about fighting? She would stand up straight and tall and say, don't do it. But Mama always says, Mama has a lot of good words of wisdom for us. So we know everything that Mama tells us is good for us. She has our best interest in heart. Proverbs 1 and 8 says, my son, hear the instructions of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. And Proverbs 6:20 says, my son, keep thy father's commandment, and forsake not the law of thy mother. You know, I find it interesting that the father gives instruction, but the law always comes from the mother. Because the mother's the ones at home who has to... We as fathers generally end up being the enforcers of the law, and mamas being the layers down of the law. They set the rules. You know, we as fathers, of course, deal with the... Like Moses had it set up, where Moses took care of the big issues and delegated the little issues. The mothers take care of the day-to-day lying. We as fathers set the main rules, and mothers then take care of all the aspects of it. All the little things, and it's her law in the home that must be followed. Leviticus 19:3 says, ye shall fear every man his mother and his father. Because we have mothers whose hands work and her mouth speak. But not only that, but her heart loves. Verses 11 through 12 says, the heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that she shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. You know, for a husband to have full confidence in his wife, when you see that in a relationship, in a marriage, you know that is a woman who loves her husband very much. One who never has to worry. Complete and utter confidence. You know, there was once a tombstone found in a graveyard that the husband was left behind after 60 years of marriage, and he had printed on his wife's tombstone, said, she always made home happy. And if that's his memory of his wife, then we know that here is a woman who did her husband good all the days of her life. There was once a little grandmother telling her granddaughter good night, and when the little girl said, Mommy and Daddy are entertaining some very important people downstairs. And the grandmother said, you're right, but how did you know this? She said, just listen and you can hear. She said, Mommy is laughing at all of Daddy's jokes. When there's laughter in the home, you know that there's something good there. God blesses laughter. God created laughter. God created humor. And it's something good for us. We know this because it tells us that in the Bible. It says, Proverbs in 17:22, it says, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. We need laughter in the homes, and mothers bring that many times. They bring that laughter in the home. That laughter that's brought in by our mothers shows a lot of love, shows a lot of good medicine being put into the house. Not only, though, does a mother give her love in laughter, she gives her love in sacrifice. There was once a young boy asked in math class. The teacher stood up and said, "James, let's suppose your mother made a cherry pie. And there's 10 of you at the table. There's 8 children, and then your mother and father. Says, how much pie would you get?" He stood right up and said, "I'd get a 9th. The teacher said, No, wait a minute. There's 10 people at the table. Is it that you don't know your fractions?" I said, "Oh, yes, ma'am. I know my fractions very well. But I know my mother even better. She would stand up and say that she didn't need any pie." The unselfishness of our mothers, never wanting something above what, if they can give it to us, they'd much rather we have it than themselves. The love that's shown out of that unselfishness. And the heart that loves is not only shown in laughter or sacrifice, but we can see in Proverbs 10:1, sometimes it's shown in sorrow. It says in Proverbs 10:1, "A wise son maketh a glad father, but a foolish son is the heaviness of his mother." When we're out there and we depart from the ways the Lord would have us to be, it burdens our mother's hearts. It hurts them. They grieve for us. Anytime, because they see God's will in our lives is never something to restrain us. It's never something to hold us under the thumb. It's always something to bring a blessing to us. And our mothers, first and foremost, see the withholding of blessings in our life when we're out of God's will. And that's where the sorrow comes from. But we know our mothers. Her hands work, her mouth speaks, and her heart loves. So in closing, I'll read this little poem. It's entitled, "Mothers Are." Mothers are blowers of noses, washers of ears, smoothers of bump spots and wipers of tears, scrubbers of dishes and wielders of mops, grandmas for doilies and winders of tops, bathers of babies and umpires of spats, finders of boots, mittens, and hats, helpers with lessons and makers of beds, shakers of dust cloths and combers of heads, button-sew-honors and winders of clocks, menders of dresses and darners of socks, tellers of stories and readers of books, judges and juries of conduct and looks, doctors for heartaches and hearers of prayers, generals directing the family affairs, tenders of home fires and builders of men. Oh, for the gift of an adequate pen. We know sometimes when we try and talk about what our mothers mean to us, especially us guys, we're not always the best with words, and our pens fail us, and there's not enough words to describe the wonderful blessing that God has given to us in the form of a mother. And as we can see through these verses in Proverbs 31, the home of a godly mother is one that is richly blessed by God. So let us all remember the rich blessings that God has given us today as we celebrate our mothers. Let's stand and be dismissed in a word of prayer.